All right, this is a part two on the shrink tubing trick. And why I'm doing it is because I'm amazed at how many people miss the point. You're working on a project and you need a piece of shrink tubing to go over something. Now that terminal I showed you that I made out of a piece of brass, now you notice that the terminal is 3/16 the piece of brass and the shrink tubing. And the wire that goes to it is thinner. So you don't want to go to the next size shrink tubing. So what I did was I showed you could stretch it, and it's going to come back in, whether you heat it up or not. That's why it was a little tough doing it in an awkward position. So the size that you have to use is 3/16. A smaller size, it ain't going to happen. You're not going to get it on there. So you take the 3/16 size, which is the closest to that brass tubing that's been cut to be a terminal, and you stretch the shrink tubing so it just goes over that. And now when you heat it up, it grips it really well. It also shrinks down on the back wire that leads to the terminal, and it looks nice. See, some guy just, why don't you just go to the next size? Hey, Padner, you're stupid. These guys are Padners. Why don't you just use the next size? Well, the next size is too big if you really want it to look nice. And people that shoot from the hip like this, they don't build anything. And I click on their names. There's no videos. They go around and they look for something and then they have a problem with it because their life is empty. And I showed you the trick because I was making those terminals. I showed you that. I'm making the terminals for that radio. And I go to use the shrink tubing and I realize I'm running out. So I shoot over to the dollar store to get my snacks for the day. And Harbor Freight's right there, Queen Harbor Freight. And I bought two rolls this time. Now the guy says just using the correct size. Well, the next size is too big. See, you don't think about that because you've never done these projects. Now the quality guys, they go, yeah, I've been using that for years, that idea. Right? That's the real answer. Well, I go somewhere. Where do you go get the shrink tubing? Where? Radio Shack. There's a few stores still left. Do they have shrink tubing in all sizes now? You just said to get the correct size. Go ahead. Go order shrink tubing. There's a minimum order. It's going to cost you a lot of money, all because you didn't stretch the shrink tubing that you could go buy at Harbor Freight. Your argument is baseless, like Joe Padner. Joe Padner would just shoot from the hip, just get the correct size. There is no correct size. It comes in 3/16. The piece of brass was 3/16. But getting it on there, I showed you. I showed you the whole thing. It didn't really want to go on. It wouldn't go over that wire. So by stretching it, you put it on there, and within a couple minutes, that thing's back down to its original size. It shrunk before you even heat it. That's the trick. And guys that really build things, they would never say something like, "Oh, you just use the correct size," because they know that sometimes you're in between sizes when you're making stuff because you've made a lot of things that the Padner types never made. Now, Padner never made anything. I told you what his job was. He was a dummy, but he had so much to say. He knew he was stupid. You could see awkwardness on his face when he didn't know the most simple things. Well, I told you he would run down, get the newspaper. He'd read the article over and over and over, and then he'd come back up and try to goat you into the subject because now he knew more than you did. Or he'd follow up the next day. We would just say, "Oh, that's a terrible thing that happened." So then he would follow up on it. He'd pull you into an argument because he just wanted to be right, and then he would dance off with his floor shine. So one guy says he thought that image was funny. His partner's feet were size 9, but when you saw those floor charms on his feet, him dancing off, and his knees were like jello because he was drunk all the time. And it was just an image. Oh, and as he went down the rack system, he would always go to the left. See, he would be to his, wait, it'd be to his left. He would like fade to his left because as he went down the racks, there was a door. And somebody would be coming out through that door. And then he'd snap out of his drunkardness. and he'd try to compensate, and he would pop into the rack system. Hilarious person, and I use him as a name, as an example. I told you he looks just like Archie Bunker's buddy at the bar. This guy with the big square head and the black hair, the bug eyes. That's him. Same thing, and his eyes were always like inflamed from being drunk. And that's what's out there. And use the right size shrink tube. And 3/16 is as close as you're going to get to that size. So to get it to go on, you put it in the pliers. And the other guy, oh, those pliers are too blunt. Where's your website? Where are your videos? Oh, I don't know how to edit. They always have excuses. You notice me. Go look at my videos. Look how many projects I built. And I built a complete power supply for the BC348. I design it, I build it. That video was actually edited. If you find the right one, there's two different. Anyway, I did the work, and I'm tired of these people, and I'm taking a break because the shrink tubing trick was up to 700 something views. It's one of my better videos. So the better the video is, YouTube shows it to people as like a thumbnail or whatever you want to call it, and then they click on it, and then they're like, well, you might have thought about it, but did you tell anybody? That's the point. All right, like I told you with that Blade 70S, I looked at it and I'm like, okay, this ain't flying right out of the box. So I see the trims. I read the instructions, which were worthless. It said the tone changed when it was in the center. It doesn't. It just, the beep gets longer. So I do a video, and then later on I redid it to refine it even better. And people still, that thing's got to be 4 years old or more. And people say, thank you, it helped me. In other words, when something helps you, there's somebody else out there that needs the help. And we was talking to one of the mailmen here, the mailman, when he has a problem with his motorcycle, he goes to YouTube, and somebody has the same problem as him. They realize that there's a trick, and they show it. But he says, the hard part? I said, yeah, going through all the videos where the person shows you, but they don't show you the trick. And he goes, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, those guys are just looking for content to make money. Now, I'm not monetized. I make no money from my videos, and I get very annoyed at the people that shoot from the hip, that make stuff up in their head. And but you do. If you look at the comments, there's people there that went, yeah, I've been using that for a few years, that idea. And then one person will say, yeah, I tried it, it works. It makes it so much easier when the shrink tubing is so close to just stretch it a little. It shrinks back on its own. When I was doing that video, because I wasn't sitting down, I couldn't go as fast. And that shrink tubing it caused a bubble in it. That shrink tubing came down on me before I was able to slide it into position. And that's what the one guy worried. The worry word, well, I guess I'm going to have to use 2 pieces. Did you watch the video? But then again, I start thinking that maybe he's not that smart. If you do it a certain way, you're going to get a bubble. No, that was because I was standing up. I was hanging over the camera. I was behind the camera, hanging over it. And I mentioned that. But they don't listen. They don't listen. That's why they never get good at the hobby. Oh, I have this problem. I can't figure this out. And that's because you've jumped into at too high a level. You don't have the where you built the crystal radio, and then the 1 transistor radio, and then you jumped in to middle of a radio, and you're trying to recap it. You don't know what a microfarad is from a 0.01 microfarad to a picofarad. You don't know the difference. So you put the wrong caps in. You order the wrong numbers. And if you watch the Shango's videos, he goes, that guy's got the wrong cap in there. So the guy's recapping a radio because he was told you have to change all the caps. And then he's got the wrong values. You don't know the difference between the values. And that's what's out there. That's the pain in the ass. And I'm trying to help those people, but you got to remember, they have a really big ego. So you start trying to teach them, they think they know it all. And those are Joe Padners. Joe Padner knew everything about everything, but he kept screwing up all the time. And one time he got really mad at me. He bought a brand new Cadillac, and he kept firing the starters. And he kept coming to me, you should know that. How come you don't know that? I said, your dealer don't know that, does it? And so finally I said, look, you tell your dealer you want the regional specialist to come out. What? the regional specialist. Just tell them that. Use the word regional specialist. I had friends that were auto mechanics, regional specialists. So he goes back and they bring the regional specialist out. And first thing the guy does is he changes the starter, and then he's looking at it and he looks at the wire going from the starter to the battery. It was the wrong diameter. When they built the car, somebody put the wrong diameter wire. It's a cable. It's made up, and it wasn't thick enough. So the starter wasn't getting enough cranking power. So it cranked too slow, too long, burnt the starter out. That's what. So he comes in. So what happened? The regional specialist came out. Hey, what did he find? It had the wrong cable on the wrong battery. The wrong cable to the battery was too thin. I go, there you go. You know, how am I sitting at my bench at work going to figure out what's wrong with his car when they put the wrong part on it? How am I going to figure that out? You know, and he didn't bring the car to me, and I wouldn't have been able to figure that out because you keep looking at that battery cable, and it's a battery cable, and you never think, you know, it could probably have a bad connection and cause the starter not to crank fast enough. But the Cadillac engine is big. He had a big engine. It has to crank at a certain speed to start. If it cranks too slow, it goes around too long, and then the current through the starter is too high or too long. It's not high enough to make it flip quick enough, and there's a Bendix gear in there. So what happens is that it gets fried. It's on too long. Let's just say that. The starter's on too long, it overheats. And you can do that to when you have a good battery and a new starter. You can ruin the starter by keep cranking the car too much because you got some other problem, a gas problem or a carburetor problem. And that's what he was getting. They kept changing the starter and giving him the car back because it was a brand new car. It was still in warranty. And I told him the words regional specialist back then. That's what I told him. And they bring the guy in. The guy looks and he goes, "Oh, we got a whole batch of these that came through with the Chevy harness on it instead of the Cadillac." Back then, the parts they were using, they were making cars real shitty. Let's just put it that way. And he got one of those. And then he's like, he was embarrassed because he bought a Cadillac that had a Chevy part on it that didn't belong on it. But I've been through the mill with people. And like I said, when I see something, I'm working, you know, I'm making the terminals for this radio. And I'll go, you know what? Let me show people this. And I know people know it. You know that. You're going to say, like, a guy will come in and just say in the comments, I've been doing that trick for 30 years. That's what you'd expect. I used the trick for over 30 years. He uses the trick for 30 years. There's guys that say they have shrink tube and that still shrinks down after 30 years or whatever. And that's what I was having the argument with the engineer. There's a chemical on the plastic that goes bad after a while, so the shrink tube but don't shrink. That's not true. It's not thermal setting plastic. It's memory plastic that's been stretched as it's cooling down when they're extruding it out. And then when you heat it up, it wants to go back to its memory plastic. It wants to go back to its real shape, and it shrinks down. That's all there is to it. But look at how many views. And some of the comments I've knocked out, people that keep coming back, I ghosted them. See, they don't even know they've been ghosted. When you ghost somebody, they post a message, but nobody can see it. They can see it, but nobody else can. So what happens is they're still around on some of my other comments. You see the guy, I'll see that someone has posted a comment, but when I go there's no comment. That guy's been ghosted. He's still trolling me. See, I don't get any money on these videos. Yeah, I'm not getting I have a better camera, but I'm not turning the resolution up. I want you to listen to what I'm saying. You know, some people want really clear pictures so they can sit there and dream that they're doing it. I don't want you. I want the guy that really wants to learn. And I show him some of my tricks and some of my tools and say, this one's really good. That's what I was doing the other day. There's certain tools everybody knows about. So, but everybody means everybody, so that's not really true. But there's tools that a lot of techs have already and they know about. And then the new guy, when he's exposed to one of the new tools, he runs out and buys it, if he still can. I mean, it's really hard to buy anything. The old days, you go to Sears, and they had some really good tools. And they weren't that expensive. And I would go every Friday. You know, my friends would all go drinking. And then a couple of them asked me, "What do you do?" I said, "Well," I said, "I go every Friday to Sears and I look at the tool that I think I need or I need and I buy it. I just don't buy tools that I think I'm going to need." And when you're working, you have your favorite pair of pliers. Now I have three favorite pliers. The one pair I showed you, I got it when I was 14. Still got that pair of pliers. And that's how I roll. And then they would say, "Well, what else do you do?" I said, "I went to arcade." So a lot of these guys were going out smoking pot after work on Friday, and a lot of them were going out to the bar. So I said, "Here, this is what we do. We'll go out as a group. We'll go over to the arcade." And we played a lot of those machines where you could play double. We did that. Then we went out and had a nice steak dinner. And then they went home. And I said, "Take the rest of the money now and start putting it away and get new cars." So a lot of them were able to get a new car. They were buying new cars, but they bought they spent too much on the car. And the cars back then were cheap. And they lived with their parents. They didn't have to pay rent. I had to pay rent. My mother charged me rent. So there's so much I've gone through that you've never gone through. But I'm trying to show you things that I say as I'm working on it. I say, "Oh, somebody would like to know this." You know, not everybody, because some of these guys are like, "Well, everybody knows that." It's not true. It's not true. A beginner, even a guy who's been in electronics for years, worked in a company that didn't have shrink tubing. He's never used it. Every connection goes to a terminal. And then some companies, when you do aerospace, every freaking wire on the back we used to call them cannon connectors. Every wire that went into that cannon connector had to have a shrink tubing behind it. Heat shrink down. And you leave 2 or 3 wires up without the shrink tubing down so the guy could inspect the soldering. And there were guys that wanted to see a ball of solder down in that terminal. And then other guys wanted to see the outline of the wire. And I thank God we got rid of the ball guys. Those are cold solder joints. But at some point, the different companies I repaired for certified me to do my own inspections. I had a stamper. You know, you have a string around your neck with this little ink pad, and you would stamp each operation that you had your hands on, and you had a number or a symbol, and they would know that you inspected that unit. I've done all the stuff these people start telling me. I've done it. Now, I worked for McGraw Edison, which is Thomas Edison Labs in West Orange. I worked for RCA in Harrison, Life Test, putting tests up under special tests for the engineers. I worked at TRW on computer systems, everything from banking systems to XPs, XTs, XP is the software, XT, Olivetti, XT and AT Olivetti equipment, which was in Italian. And I have other jobs in between there as consultant, but I've done it. And as I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? Let me show other people. But the Padners don't understand that. Padners are stupid. And they're people that just go through the world just being obnoxious and rude. And then, "Oh, you're rude. You're not." No, I'm responding to you. I reflect what you send to me, I send back. But I just wanted to tell you, I had the right size shrink tubing. 3/16. Next size up is too big. Size below is too small. So you stretch it a little, and it makes it go on nice. It shrinks. I did the right thing. Well, the guy's worrying about the little bubble. I said in the video, I'm not sitting down. I'm in an awkward position. I'm trying to get the damn piece of shrink tubing all over the thing because it's starting to shrink back down. After you stretch a little bit, it shrinks back down. It's memory plastic. I think that's right. I think that's it. I think that's it. All right, that's it.